you're going to tell us about SEO.
Okay, my goodness. Well, now that we've got all this time, I guess I have an hour pretty much
No,
to talk to you guys. No, I'll make it as quick as I can. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So basically, what I want to do now, I tend to be very enthusiastic about this stuff, as Jim knows, or anybody who works on the webinar committee. I tend to do a lot, and to pack in a lot of content. So I'll try to go through this really quickly, in the hopes that I can pretty much spread knowledge, and not inundate and bore you guys. So really quickly, the quick preamble. Obviously, I'm not a digital marketing expert. I got into this very, very quickly, or just recently. A lot of my experience really is just in classical product and brand management, advertising, and sales. But what I'd like to do really is, the hope is that after this, you can get a little comfortable with some of the principles before you pass a client on to another SEO mentor. And so what I wanted to talk about was, so what's the big deal with SEO? Okay. So SEO is in Wikipedia defined as search engine optimization. And essentially it is the process of improving the quality and quantity of traffic to a specific website or web page from the search engines. Now, targets primarily unpaid traffic, or organic and natural, as opposed to direct or paid traffic. Okay. So why is it important? Well, basically, as Brian Mills says here, if you're not doing SEO, it's very difficult for even somebody like Brian Mills to find your website. Okay. So as we move forward, SEO success basics really hinge on the realization of what the goals and objectives of search engines are. And that is essentially to deliver the best websites that address a searcher's needs and wants. That really is it. Okay. And that has an impact on many aspects of website development and properties, with respect to the content, the architecture, how easy they are to navigate. But even most importantly, does your client's website do what they purport it does? In other words, the more satisfied the searcher, the higher your client's website will rank. Now, the algorithm, has some ranking factors that they normally run. Primarily, it really just is based on relevance. In other words, is the web page or delivered relevant to the searcher's query? Does the website, exhibit authority? So is the content provided robust enough to denote authority? In other words, does it have heat? Okay, expertise, authority, and trust. Okay, trust comes down to security, if you would. Okay, and finally, user satisfaction. As we said, does the site provide value and satisfaction to the searcher? Even better, does the site deliver a pleasurable experience, quote unquote, to the searcher? Okay. So as we move forward, ranking hinges heavily on search intent. Okay. A big part of understanding how SEO works is understanding what is the intent of your client's search. Okay. Now, there are four kinds of search intent, basically. One is informational, okay, which is asking who, why, what, how, and where. Okay. Then the next one is commercial. Okay. When after they've asked for informational questions, they then move on to a little more serious consideration of their options. This versus that, which is better or worse. Give me some comparisons, or give me a feature list. Finally, there's transactional search, which now they're a little more involved in the purchase process and thinking really more of issues like, is it free shipping? What is the pricing? Are there any coupons? Where can I buy that product and or service? And finally, there's what's the most specific, which is navigational searches. They now know where they want to go, right? And so they type in the brand, okay, and their intent is set, and they look for a specific website. So to give you guys some examples of what these searches look like. When you come in, this at the top of the funnel, tofu, at the top of the funnel, you'll have informational searches. Somewhere in the middle of the funnel, you'll have the commercial and the transactional searches. And then finally, at the bottom of the funnel, you'll have the navigational searches. In other words, the further down the funnel you move, the higher the intensity is of the searcher to buy or to engage in a specific service. Okay. So when you're thinking about your client's website, you really want to think about what are the search intents that your client is addressing? Is it at the top of the funnel? Is it closer to the bottom of the funnel? Therefore, how close is the prospective customer to actually engaging with your client? Because then, if you look at a search engine result from an informational search, this here was a search that I asked, who is Will Smith? So now we've got Will Smith. We see a Wikipedia page. We see an about section. Now, if I go through the full search, the search engine's results page, it will also show me people also asked some other questions about Will Smith. What were the top stories about Will Smith? And you can imagine what those top stories would be, right? His IMDb profile, videos featuring Will Smith, some of which would refer to the top stories, before mentioned, organic results, any other search results referring to Will Smith, and then finally related searches. And then his social media IDs, his Instagram, his TikTok, his Facebook page, et cetera. Okay. So that would be like an informational search engine results page outcome when I'm looking for who is, what is something. Okay. Now, if we go into a commercial search outcome, I'm looking for best free business mentoring services. As you can see here, the first few are ads. Okay, you can tell they're ads because these people have paid to be featured when this term gets pulled up. So you'll see Business Next Door, Pacific.com, NewYorkCity.score.org. Oh, look at that. YoungEntrepreneurSClub.com. And then below the ads, we have organic results. And the first one would thankfully show up as score.org, the organization. Then the next section would be people also asked. Okay, what about best free business mentoring services? Then the rest would be organic results. Okay, other mentoring services not scored. Okay, and then another section of ads at the bottom of the page. And then finally related searches. Okay. A transactional search, outcome would be like in my I put down buy Nike shoes. And sure enough, up on top, you'll see the ads featuring the product carousels of Nike shoes. You can see here Nike, and this here, ads for people who had paid for that term, so that they will show up. And now after the ads, that would be followed by organic results, which was Nike.com. A local map, what's called a local stack that shows me the stores in my area that sell Nike. Other stores beyond the stores in my local area, footlocker.com, dickstores.com, et cetera. And then popular products, very similar to this one, very similar to these Nike shoes, except of a different fill. And then finally, the last set of ads, and then related searches. That's a transactional search engine results page outcome. Finally, a navigational search outcome. I typed down score New York City, again, very directed, navigational, the brand. And so my first one is the ad itself, before I actually get the information, New York, cityscore.org. You'll see on the right-hand side, the Google business profile, or what used to be called Google My Business. Below this now is a series of Facebook, and webinars and videos, and then finally the people also ask, and then related searches at the bottom, and that was a navigational search. So as you can see, starting from the informational down through to the navigational, we now have an idea roughly of what the search intents are of the prospective customers. So how do we help our score clients with SEO? The first is to understand that SEO is built off of a lot of different areas and variables. When you hear, you'll hear keyword, you'll hear content, you'll hear SEO, you'll hear technical SEO, and so on. All right. So from our perspective, these are multiple disciplines. And more often than not, when I speak to somebody who says they're good at SEO, very seldom are they actually good in all aspects of things. More often than not, they specialize in keyword optimization. Sometimes some of them specialize in content creation, et cetera. The truth of the matter is, in the end, we have to acknowledge that at the baseline, is crawl accessibility. So that the engines can reach and index your content. Then above that is making sure that content is compelling enough to answer your client's concerns. Then above that is making sure that the keywords are optimized so that a search engine knows what the content is about and can offer it effectively and efficiently to the searcher. Above that, now you have a great user experience. Is the content share-worthy? Okay, that means are there links and citations, and is it amplified well enough for the search engine to say, this content is good, a lot of people are sharing it, therefore I should offer it. Okay, then the top part above that are the title, the resource location, the universal resource location and description to draw a high click-through rate in the rankings. In other words, this part of it just describes what the website is about so that the engine knows what your website is talking about and can offer it faithfully. Okay.
But maybe
then above that, essentially, are what are called snippet and schema markup.
No, that's already
those
taped
really
on
are
Zoom.
tricks, of
But
programming to make sure that when your client's website shows up in search engine results page, it's very clear and compelling that the searcher will want to click on it. All right. So from our perspective as SCORE mentors, theoretically, what I'd like to think about is what can we do in your first or second sessions to meet with your clients to address crawl accessibility, how to address a great user experience, and then title, URL, and descriptions. Okay. Notice I'm keeping away from other aspects like compelling content, keyword optimization, share-worthy content, and schema markups, because those are things that, in time, I may discuss at another time. Right now, what I'd like to do from your standpoint is to help everybody go through steps to really address crawl accessibility, great user experience, and this part here, title, URL, and descriptions, okay? In order to do that, I'm going to take a step back, and everybody needs to understand that Google undergoes algorithm changes. We've heard this many times, right? And people are wondering, what does that mean? What are you talking about? So I'll go through at least eight major algorithm changes, okay, that have shown up since 2011. Okay, Google's been around since 1998, basically. So the first major one was in 2011 was to correct keyword stuffing. Okay, that was to make sure that people wouldn't just go ahead and put keywords in to game the system. Okay, and if the keywords were just being stuffed in there just so that they would have a keyword frequency, but the stuff made absolutely no sense, that was what Panda was trying to correct. Okay. And then the second one in 2012 was Penguin, which basically was just making sure, okay, that the backlinks, because backlinking again was another variable that would determine how weighted, okay, or how a particular website would rank. So what Google did, at least with Penguin, was just to make sure that the backlinks that were sending people to a particular page had what they call domain authority, okay, and relevance. And not just indiscriminate backlink. Okay. That was just to stop the gaming. Yeah. Then another one in 2013 with Hummingbird addressed keyword stuffing, and a big part of this is sometimes what's called low quality content. Okay, that means basically people would just go ahead, just try to stuff keywords and make content that in essence was not addressing the needs of the searcher. Okay, then eventually in 2014 was Pigeon, which was essentially Google just making sure that searches that were done in a particular location were relevant to the people within a geographic area. So the example that's given, for example, in one of the videos on Google, right, is a person typing lasagna. Okay, out in Oromea, Italy, might be interested in the lasagna festival. But the person typing lasagna in Madison, Wisconsin, would not be interested in the lasagna festival in Italy. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's essentially what Pigeon is making sure it's happening, is that when a person is searching, it really takes into account your location, right? And then offers up the search results that are applicable to you specifically. Okay. Then the next part really was in 2015 was mobile get on, basically, or mobile. And that was just to reward mobile consideration. In other words, websites that did not prioritize or that did not allow for good mobile transition were penalized. Okay. RankBrain in 2015 was essentially machine learning. Okay. And that was just to put context into the queries. because before, now in at least for RankBrain, what Google did was it made sure that the AI could understand the context of the queries, synonyms, antonyms. What is the context of the question being asked? Okay, and that was basically with RankBrain. Okay, Possum. Okay, in 2018 again comes down to the local search, pretty much building off Pigeon, but putting it up on steroids basically. And this then showed a lot more of maps and local pack activity. This is really very important for those of us who have clients who have retail operations. This is pretty much roughly when Google My Business started to show up, when local SEO really started to drive for results. Okay. Then in 2018, eventually we got, Fred, okay, which targets excessive ads, okay, and penalizes low value content. In other words, poor experiences on your website will penalize you in a ranking. Okay. So as you look through the timeline, if you would, of the major Google algorithm updates, you've seen most of them, okay, but there is one, Medic, right, which penalized low expertise, authority, and trust sites. Your money, your life is basically what this means. So in areas of finance, law, and medicine, what Medic did was it penalized sites for coming up with information that would not actually solve questions that would answer your money, your life, okay, and gave low expertise, authority, and trust. Okay. Then after that was BERT, okay, in 2019, which was essentially a language processing update. Okay. For context, it punishes low value content. In other words, if you were just keyword stuffing, putting content out there that did not contextually answer the searcher's intent, theoretically, you would be punished. Okay. Then in 2020, last year, was core updates with a page experience update. And that's pretty much what we'll be tackling, what I'm going to be talking to us about. Okay. Because in 2021, essentially, the update was really core web vitals, okay, which would measure the loading speed, the interactivity, and the visual stability of our clients' websites. Okay. Now these are already in it: mobile friendliness, safe browsing, security, non-intrusive interstitials. You see, so these were already part of the algorithm. It's just that in 2021, midpoint last year, we had what was essentially core web vitals. And core web vitals, are basically three main variables: what's called LCP, largest contentful paint; FID, first input delay; and CLS, cumulative layout shift. So this is all computer googly-gook, basically. LCP means how long does it take for me to load the largest block of content, okay, into my browser. Okay. The first input delay is, what is the delay from the first time I click on something to the time I get a response from your website? A cumulative layout shift basically means, that the image is stable when it's loading. I don't know if many of you have experienced this, that when you're loading a particular website, sometimes the point that you see, it just shifts and it moves. Okay, that's bothersome. So essentially what CLS tries to do is it measures the stability of your page loading. Okay, and all of this pretty much just comes down to, from your perspective, what will you do? Okay. You will concentrate on crawlability first, as I mentioned earlier, foundational, okay, with respect to understanding SEO from our standpoint, okay. Make sure before you do, before we concentrate on the crawlability, make sure that your client has Google Analytics, okay. And because you want them to measure organic acquisition before and after you execute the changes, all right. Now, I'll have a caveat about Google Analytics. Google Analytics essentially has been universal analytics, okay, which is what I was certified on. But I just found out that universal analytics will be phased out at June of next year, okay, when they start using what's called GA4 or Google Analytics 4. Just personally, I hate GA4, right? But I just have to get used to it because that's what's going to be, universalized now, starting, midpoint next year. But the fact remains that before you have your clients undergo any of the activities that I'll be discussing shortly, make sure that they have Google Analytics, because we want to make sure that we are measuring the impact of the changes that you will have to make. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and I will have you perform SEO audits. Okay. you will learn how to use a free tool called SE Optimer, okay, which gives free 3 audits a day, free 3 audits, okay. And I know that because every once in a while, by the time I get to my 4th and 5th audit of the day, it just stops me and says, you can't do this, okay. And so if that happens, then I use something called boostability.com, okay. I also use a Google extension called SEO Quake, okay, to highlight tweaks, okay, that I can identify on my client's website, okay. Then finally, I use Google Page Speed Up Insights to highlight performance shortfalls and opportunities to fix. Remember how the earlier part of Google Core Web Vitals was really performance, okay, and a lot of that is answered by Google Core Web Vitals, right? So let's go into SE Optimer. Basically, I ran our website, newyorkcity.score.org through SE Optimer. Okay, as you can see here, the page is very good. On-page SEO is great. Performance is good. That's speed, right? There's a section here that hasn't linked, okay, because I'm not an admin on this site, which is backlinks, okay. And then the other part, essentially social. And yet, since I'm not an admin on this page, it didn't do a full SE Optimer review for me. But right off the bat, when this happens and you're doing an SE audit, the first thing you focus on is usability, right? And you're wondering what's going on with usability. So we scroll down to where the usability section is. And in this particular case, usability, at least for the website, just talks about legible font sizes. And that usually comes down to mobile transitions, okay? And it just says that probably could be tweaked a little better. It's just saying also that theoretically, right now, Google Core Web Vitals is not really doing a very good measure of the newyorkcity.score.org site, okay? So then I go ahead and I run Boostability as well, okay? Now, Boostability, notice here, okay, when I run this website, I put my real name in, if you would, Tim Contado, and my real email address at the time. Ever since, and I do easily 5 or 6 of these a day. Okay, now I just go ahead and put in made-up names. In any case, what I've done is I just go ahead and run through a whole list of Lord of the Rings characters. This would be Legolas Greenleaf. So as you can see, Legolas Greenleaf at gmail.com. And I put in, a 615, a 555 1212 number because I don't want them calling me. Okay. Because that happened the very first time. Sure enough, they called me. We had a discussion and I spoke to the tech manager and he said, you want to run these audits for a bunch of websites? Here's what you do. And so I took him up on his advice. All right. So go ahead and put in your client's website. This is what a boostability result will show you. It will basically give you some pointers of what can be tweaked. And the best part about each of these is when you click on it, it will give you details, okay, of what to address. Alternative text. This basically mentions, okay, that there are some pictures in our website in the newyorkcity.score.org, okay, that are not alt text. Okay, in other words, not coded for a Google search engine to identify some images. All right. There's some other things. The code quality, I'm not terribly concerned about that. Google Business Profile, that's not true. Okay. That's not true because we have one. Okay. An Instagram account, again, not LinkedIn specifically. The local presence, theoretically could be tweaked a little better. Mobile speed, that's almost always the case. All right. And voice search. Okay. Voice search means a website hasn't been optimized for an Alexa search by voice. And that can be done easily enough. I mean, you don't get too many points for that, but it can be done. And this here then is our website. And I use SEO Quake. So I'll give you an idea of what I do when I run SEO Quake on a website. SEO Quake right here then in my Google extensions is, as you can see here, this right there, right? So I go ahead and I click SEO Quake and you can see the options that I have: page info, diagnosis, internal, external, and density. What I normally look at is diagnosis and density, okay? So let's look at diagnosis. The diagnosis now will give me, okay, areas to improve the customer's website in, okay? Canonical tag is set and is working fine. newyorkcity.score.org, and that score.org is fine. Okay, in the title, okay, 21 characters is optimal. The truth of the matter is you have up to 70 characters to define your title, okay? This is fine. We're using 21 characters. But what you can usually do with your clients is ask them, does that describe what your website does to a spider? In other words, theoretically, what we would want this to say is New York City, score dash free business mentoring, something to that effect. That theoretically would handle it a whole lot more effectively. And this would be applicable to most of our clients' websites. Okay. So then you go ahead and realize you have 70 characters to really describe what the website does for a client. You pretty much got, meta descriptions, which are again, descriptions to help a spider identify what the website is about. In this particular case, it's just saying that we are using too many characters. So theoretically, we try to shorten it. More often than not, for our clients, we need to lengthen it. We need to put more copy, okay, to define our clients' websites better for a website spider. Okay, this goes on. It will tell me if this website has Google Analytics or not, and so forth and so forth, right? Then I go into density. Okay, so as you can see here, I'll go into density, all right? What is density? Now, remember that right now, even with all of the updates, in essence, a spider is a program, in essence, right? And remember, that a big part of it, beyond all the contextual meaning and so forth, okay, all it can do at this early stage is look at words, okay? So what density does is this just goes through all of the words on the front page of the website, okay? It counts up how frequently those words are used, okay? And then it builds you a keyword cloud to suggest, what is this website about? This here is talking about business, volunteer, mentoring, small New York workshops. Those are the most frequently reported words. Okay, you will find more often than not with a lot of your clients that these keyword clouds will not reflect what their website is about. So then the question comes down to, if a spider does not know or cannot identify what your website is about, how will it rank your website when a searcher is looking for it? Okay, so that's what you run, SEO Quake to do. All right. Then you go ahead and we look, for Google Core Web Vitals to go through, each of those main variables. You can do it with Google Search Console. Okay. In this particular case, for one of my clients, I have Google Analytics access, so I can run that, right? You can do something called SEO Works. Okay. But that's a 7-step process that takes way too much time, but it's got nice graphics and it gives me a nice interface. It just takes me a long time to actually get the feed that I need to understand the core web vitals for a specific account. What I've found, at least, that's something that's universal for everybody, is to use Google Page Speed Insights. So go ahead, click on Page Speed Insight, Page Speed Google Dev, enter the client's URL and run the analysis. This is roughly what you'll get. You'll have, a Google Core Web Vitals score. Now this one, I don't think this is for us. I think this is for a client, okay, of ours. Then what will happen is you'll have a mobile read and a desktop read, okay? And you'll see here, the FCP, the FID, the LCP, and the CLS, scores. But even more importantly, from that standpoint, it also gives you improvement suggestions for them. Now, I'll tell you, okay, I don't do the improvement suggestions. I'm not a coder, all right? But, if your client has a person who actually does their website work for them, this is more often than not the best way to give them instructions on what to do, to bone up their website's effectiveness, okay? Then remember what I was talking about, results, right? Before and after. In this particular case, what I do is make sure that you have them in Google Analytics. In this case, what we did was, I pulled February 16th to March 28th because I started working with this client in February 16th. And I told them to take on these steps on February 16th, right? And I compare it to the same results a year ago. Organic results, which is the main objective of SEO, right? As you can see, the increase in organic results is almost 180%. Okay. And then you'll also see that the conversion rate, which is pretty much the way I constructed their funnel, was actually contacting them through, based on their goals. The conversion rate increased 25% with 76% increase in organic traffic. Okay. Now, the key from all of this, folks, is it's free. Everything that I've mentioned right now is free. Okay. And it will take a little effort and a little time on their part. Okay. But the results, may not be immediate. In fact, I just attended an SEO webinar by SCORE, and the expert who spoke at that time, I agree with wholeheartedly. She said that these steps are good if and when you have the time to build the infrastructure of your website. But if you need people to call you right away, advertising is the best way to actually get that action. And as anathema as that is to me, normally, I agree with what she was saying, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, for our clients, we have to think of, there are three main platforms. There's owned media, there's earned media, and then there's paid media, okay? And so what I'd like to walk our clients through is, let's master owned media as much as possible. Let's get as much earned media as we can, and then you can start talking paid, right? But it makes sense, much like that expert had said, that when you need these people to call right away, paid media works. And with that, I agree wholeheartedly. But that doesn't preclude, okay, our clients working on these aspects of enriching their websites, okay? So, summary, okay, for SEO, tackle crawlability issues first, okay? Next, perform an SEO audit using the tools that I just mentioned. By the way, I will send this to Karen to send to everybody, all right? Third, track your performance versus year ago or versus prior period, okay? And then eventually we graduate to content generation and keyword optimization, okay? Which is a completely different discipline, And then of course we tweak further with sitemaps and schema, okay? Sorry, I'm gonna stop the share and share again, just making sure that I had sound yet, okay? And yet, despite it all, as we quote unquote master, algorithm updates, sure enough, Google brings another algorithm update in, Google MUM, which is multitask unified model. And that's starting to be executed this year. So as much as I am comfortable, okay, understanding the effect of Google Core Web Vitals and making the changes that have actually seen, some results with my clients, sure enough, starting this year, Google puts in another algorithm update. But the truth of the matter is the universal strategy remains the same, okay? So long as we keep in mind that the main objective is to satisfy the searcher's needs, these algorithm changes don't mean as much, okay? And so let me show you guys what MUM is all about, basically.
I'm excited to share how we'll be bringing some of these research advances to Google Search with a multitask unified model.
Oh, sorry, stop this share. Okay, it's probably better if sorry about that. I thought that would have transitioned more easily. Let me just, pardon me, okay, sorry. Let me just actually pull it. This video is just 3 minutes long, but let me just go ahead and pull it up off of, the YouTube. Any questions in the meantime?
I have 100 questions.
Okay, yeah. So if you can just hang on to that just for a sec, let me go ahead and I'll share that video and then I can answer your questions. Sorry about that.
Podium makes local business as easy as sending a text. In today's world, people can get almost...
I'm excited to share how we'll be bringing some of these research advances to Google Search with a multitask unified model, or MUM, as we like to call it. Like BERT, it's built on the transformer architecture, but it turns up the dial. You see, MUM is 1,000 times more powerful than BERT. But what makes this technology groundbreaking is its ability to multitask in order to unlock information in new ways. Here are a few tasks it can handle at the same time. It can acquire deep knowledge of the world. It can understand language and generate it too. It can train across 75 languages at once, unlike most AI models, which train on one language at a time. And then what makes Mum even more amazing is that it's multimodal, which means it can simultaneously understand different forms of information, like text, images, and videos. We've already started some internal pilots to see the types of queries it might be able to solve and the billions of topics it might help you explore. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say you're an avid hiker planning your next adventure. You might ask, I've hiked Mount Adams and now want to hike Mount Fuji next fall. What should I do differently to prepare? This is a question you could casually ask a friend, but search engines today can't answer it directly because it's so conversational and nuanced. Mum is changing the game. With its language understanding capabilities, it would know you're looking to compare two mountains and also understand that prepare could include things like fitness training for the terrain and hiking gear for fall weather. Then, it's able to surface useful insights based on its deep knowledge of the world. Here, it's highlighting that Mount Fuji is roughly the same elevation as Mount Adams, but fall is the rainy season on Mount Fuji, so you might need a waterproof jacket. It would also give you pointers to go deeper on topics, like how to prepare the right gear with articles, videos, and images from across the web. Now, a huge limitation of accessing information is the language it's written in. If there are insights about Mount Fuji in Japanese, you might not know they exist if you don't search in Japanese. But Mum can transfer language across multiple languages to give you a richer, more comprehensive answer. But it doesn't stop there. Because Mum is multimodal, it can understand different types of information simultaneously. So now imagine taking a photo of your hiking boots and asking, can I use these to hike Mount Fuji? Mum would be able to understand the content of the image and the intent behind your query, let you know that your hiking boots would just work fine, and then point you to a list of recommended gear in a Mount Fuji blog.
Okay, yeah.
Google search.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So yeah, that pretty much is Mum. You know, and like I said, as much as one tries to keep up with these algorithms and updates, sure enough, they bring another one. But thankfully enough, the universal strategy remains the same. Okay, and as long as one keeps making sure, right, that that the searcher's intents are met, okay, by your client's websites, then you will rank a little more highly. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Okay. Mary. Yeah. Oh, you're muted, Mary.
A little bit in greater depth, what exactly crawlability means?
Crawlability basically means how easy does your website make it for the spider to go through and review the website. Has it defined what the sections of the website are? Does it impinge, the spider from exploring particular pages? That essentially what crawlability is.
But let's, as you say, the algorithms have changed. It used to be you had to put the keywords and titles and descriptions, what do they call the
meta keywords?
Keywords and the headings and so forth, to explain when you arrive on the front page what exactly you're looking at. Heading 1, heading 2, etc. But does it mean that no longer matters as much? Is it that even if you put the keywords in different pages, that's okay, and all that matters is be very clear what the sections are? I mean, what's the takeaway? How do you think of, how do we approach this?
No, that's a good question. So the the way I can answer that, right, is normally the factors that are used, to rank a particular web page or series of web pages number over 200. Okay. When I took the Google page ranking audit, which is essentially what they send to people to rank how web searches, appear, whether or not a change is active and so forth. What I'm seeing in any case is that we don't move away from the H1, H2, H3, HTML headings and so forth, because they are the most, right now, the easiest way to identify what your website is about. I think the key, for a lot of this really hinges on solidifying the searcher's intent and making sure that the signals that one gives a spider, be it in headings, be it in content, and so forth, address said searcher's intents.
So what you're saying is that what the person sees at the landing page is still the most important thing in communication, forgetting about search. Because one of the things I tell people is that when someone comes to your website, they have about 7 or 8 seconds to decide whether or not it's for them. And that's even apart from any of the Google Analytics and so forth. It's like, the raw impression. You come to a website, I get it, I don't get it, it's for me, it's not for me, and what's it for? So basically you're saying that's still paramount.
It's very important. But, the perspective that I have on a lot of this, right, is a website, until a website, what tends to happen for a lot of our clients is that the majority of the traffic to their website will be direct, people that they tell to go to the website, social, people that they know within their circle, okay, that are clicking on their social pages, okay, and or referral, which is basically from their emails with a backlink to the website. The issue, right, is that is directly correlated to their actions and their activities. The whole idea behind structuring your website for SEO is to enable your website to show up for people who don't know you directly or who aren't linked to you. Okay. So a lot of these steps, as I say to a few of my clients, SEO will not press your accelerator pedal. All it does at this stage really is just making sure that the oil has been changed in your car, that your tires are not running flat, okay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just now to address your point, the key is the whole idea behind SEO is just to make your website as visible as possible to a person with a search intent. Okay. And then addressing what you're trying to say, the key, from that perspective is every time I look at people's websites, the first things that I always do, okay, very seldom will I make a judgment on the website until I have behavioral data. Okay. And so the first thing that I do outside of getting people to get Google Analytics is to get Microsoft Clarity. I used to say Hotjar before, you might remember that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's now what I go with is Microsoft Clarity.
How's it different?
It's almost exactly the same, and it's actually a little more robust, from an analytical perspective. And Microsoft Clarity is free forever. There's no paywall. Hotjar had this thing where a few people would sign up for Hotjar and then it would activate because they didn't sign up for it correctly. But Microsoft Clarity is just free, period. And then what I found, at least in dealing, so that helps the most. Okay, and beyond the heat map, the scroll map is one of the most important reads in Microsoft Clarity, because what tends to happen is a lot of our clients tend to put their key communication objectives below the first fold. So what we try to do, and it falls in line very much with what you're saying, Mary. I mean, you're a branding person, so you get that 7-8 second hit, right? But then, what I want to do after that is once we have behavioral data, then I quickly look through their websites, right? And more often than not, one of the things that tends to happen when a person has their website, okay, is that they usually aren't thinking about it, from the perspective of how people tend to read, especially those of us who are, of our age, tend to read in what are called F patterns, right? So this is generally how websites are viewed. Okay, so that's the first thing we do. Now, millennials don't do it that way. Millennials tend to read websites like so. Okay, but assuming that a good number of the visitors to your client's website read in F patterns, then you go ahead. A lot of people tend to put their logos right here, and they'll put their menus and so forth in this part, right?
What's going on?
What I usually have people do more often than not, and
I missed
I
last
found
week, but they
conversions
had a
have
big
actually
party
reflected
and
that.
cheese
Is
and
I
she
normally
was
have them
and a
put
big crush on Austin.
logos right
They had a big
here,
affair last
and then and then we'll
But then
have all of the
full
options, the menu
girl,
options and so forth over here.
blonde ones.
Then, depending on what the messaging is, I try to make the subliminal break right over here. So I've got the logo, the subliminal break for their messaging, and what can I do on your website? Then one of the first things that I ask them to do more often than not, right, is I ask them to lock this part of the website. Okay. That way, when people move up and down their website, the key communication objectives stay up on top. Then you just go ahead and you make sure that when people are going down through an F pattern, just looking at how the website reads, then normally what I try to do, it's basically objective driven design, right? What is it that you want to communicate, and how are we making sure that that's reflected on your website using Microsoft Clarity and subliminal messaging?
So subliminal messaging would be like a benefit statement. Is that a benefit statement or a tagline?
Yeah. Basically, your positioning, right? So normally what we try to do is logo, and then, who you are, what have you, and then home, right? And then in that home about section and so forth, what tends to happen, a lot of our people don't highlight the button that they want people to click, shop, contact, right? But what happens more often than not is our clients with their websites, and it's easily done in Wix, it's easily done in WordPress and so forth, is when they scroll down, the key part disappears. Okay. And so normally, depending on how much real estate is dedicated to that section, at least you're able to keep it there as they're scrolling and reviewing the pages. Then you use Microsoft Clarity to see whether or not you're getting a good percentage of the pages read and viewed.
That's really helpful, particularly since you're saying that most people come to the site not through search, but through social or referrals or intent. So even above crawlability, this is the first thing you should do, is make sure that what they see upon arriving at a website is critical and locking in the key information.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In essence. Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Tim?
Jason. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you. I'm a new mentor in training. I'm excited to be here because this is fascinating. This is fascinating how people make decisions like this. I had a question about social media indexing. I serve primarily bars and restaurants, and everybody's obsessed with putting up pretty pictures on Instagram. And I've been kind of banging the drum that it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with how people actually make decisions or make reservations. How is that true? Or is that false? Am I right or am I wrong? How do the search engines look at social media to lend relevancy to the websites?
It is certainly an aspect of the ranking algorithm. Okay. Now, to be fair, Jason, how much of it is weighed, I don't know. And so normally what one does for our clients who have a lot of social media and direct a lot of social media traffic to their website is, again, sorry to bore everybody with Google Analytics, but that's sort of the answer, right? One goes into Google Analytics, the acquisition report, and you look at the source of traffic to the website, okay? And then you look at when you look at Google Analytics, it's basically the acronym is ABC, okay? Acquisition, behavior, and conversion. Okay? Now, when you know what the acquisition source is, you can then look at the behavior due to that acquisition source and which of those acquisition sources are converting. Yeah. So that's normally what one does.
Other questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
Jason, all right, Jeff?
Yeah, Tim, I was just, thanks. I think you and I have done at least one session talking about this topic. I was just wondering, I noticed, because I'm working on this for my own business, and I'm also working on it for clients. I noticed that I go to my site and a lot just messing around with it. And I'm like, since I don't have a lot of traffic, I'm just seeing my activity. And I was wondering, how do you get that activity out of the mix?
Yeah.
Because I think it's sometimes hard to discern if those are real clients coming there, or is it just me messing around, or someone else, a web crawler going there, or whatever?
That's a fair question. Thankfully enough, Google Analytics allows you to disqualify by ISP.
ISP, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So essentially, once you've determined the ISPs you want to disqualify from the visits, go ahead, and it's basically in the admin lower left, and then you can just go ahead and disqualify specific ISPs from those visits.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions for Tim?
Yeah, Ayaz, I think.
Hi, thanks, Tim. This is sort of like a stepping back kind of question, because again, this is a field that I'm not quite as familiar with, but I'm really interested into diving deeper into. So do you have resources, or do you have your own page or somewhere link for resources where if you really were wanting to go into this digital marketing at a more methodical step-by-step basis, because it is so vast and broad now, where would you get started? Or basically, since you sort of came at this, from not having necessarily a background, but I think you'd mentioned it was a couple of years ago really that you started getting into it, and knowing what you know now, where would be the spot that you would start?
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, it was almost a burst pattern is how I did it, and then finding the resources that slowly helped me understand, and put frameworks around, because there's so much information out there. I was getting flabbergasted with how do I cut this into digestible pieces that I can understand, much less communicate.
Exactly.
So in my case, what ended up happening was
Ferragosto?
The crux,
The vacation?
about 2 years ago, was
Yeah,
when
what
I
about
met
it?
up with an SEO guy from Dallas. Okay. And a client that I had actually met with him. I went into the notes. Okay. And he had mentioned SEO Quake and SE Optimer. And I was like, what in the world are those? So then I met with him, and he and I had, a session together, after which then I dove into it myself. Okay. And the main learning that he sort of hammered into me, right, which ran very contrary to my training as a marketing and branding guy, was you need a lot of content, a lot of copy on a page. And I was like, that runs contrary to everything, I've been trained to do, much like Mary, where picture says 1,000 words, right? And the video says 32 pictures per second, or 60 if you want, right? But that was sort of how I was thinking. But his main drive to me was our clients' first customer is a search engine spider.
Right.
After which the rest falls into place. Okay. So from that standpoint, I listened to, so there was a podcast that I listened to when I'm on the rowing machine, which helped me a lot. And this one helped me just with respect to, I don't know if you've heard some of these kinds of webinars that I've done, but I did one on YouTube, and, I'm putting something together for Instagram, for Facebook, and it was through social media marketing with Michael Stelzner. Okay. So I just, I would just plug that in when I was on the rowing machine, and I would inevitably hear something interesting or new that I hadn't thought about, and I go ahead and I try it. Now, what I have found, Ayaz, in my particular case, is that what has been helpful, not necessarily for me, but hopefully for my clients, is when I have been able to walk them through these kinds of frameworks, they are now a little more careful about paying for vendors. Okay. And a point of pride from my standpoint is a particular one that Jim Ellis and I share, who does French elite tutoring. He basically now takes it as a point of pride that when he calls a vendor, he starts hammering them and asking them until he uncovers their BS, right? And they get frustrated and they say, obviously you're not the client for me, and they hang up on him, right? Because the saying, or what I've tried to hammer into his head, okay, and you'll hear this from a lot of your clients who say SEO people come to them and say it takes months for SEO to take hold, right? But it will cost you $300 a month. But we need at least 6 months, in order. So there's only one guarantee, Ayaz. The only guarantee they can give is that they make $300 a month. That's the only guarantee they can give.
My company's paid way more than that. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's an interesting thing because I was just meeting with a friend of mine yesterday, and he just told me that he's paying his digital agency $80,000 a month with $1 million digital ad budget. And so he had me, basically, I ran them through the ringer yesterday. Okay. And now he's now paying them 20 grand a month.
Wow.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions? I want to
Thank you.
take a few other matters. All right. So we're almost done. I want to, considering that we had content that we were going to do today, but Jack is not available. Let me take this opportunity